When Trump said, "Saudi king, kiss my ass," most people laughed. I didn't. Because I knew what it meant for the petrodollar, and what I found should worry every American watching this right now. If you're new here, welcome to Finance Truths. Hit that subscribe button right now. Drop your opinion in the comments below and stay with me until the very end, because this one connects dots that most financial analysts are deliberately avoiding. The petrodollar isn't just a finance term. It is the skeleton of American global power. Every time a country buys oil, they need US dollars to do it. That single arrangement, built in 1974, has given America the ability to run deficits, print money, and maintain military dominance without collapsing under its own debt. But that arrangement is now being challenged from multiple directions simultaneously. And most people have no idea how serious this is. Let's start with Trump. His rhetoric toward Saudi Arabia has been aggressive, transactional, and at times openly insulting. When he made that statement about the Saudi king, it wasn't just a political soundbite. It was a signal to the entire Middle East that America's posture toward its Gulf partners had fundamentally shifted. Saudi Arabia noticed. The rest of the Arab world noticed. And more importantly, Beijing noticed. Now layer that onto the Iran situation. The ongoing military escalation involving Iran is not just a regional conflict. It is a direct threat to the architecture of Middle Eastern oil flow. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, the single most critical choke point for global oil shipping. Roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through that strait every single day. Any serious military escalation involving Iran puts that choke point at risk. And when that choke point is at risk, the entire petrodollar system becomes vulnerable. Here's what most people miss. The petrodollar doesn't just depend on oil being traded in dollars. It depends on stable, predictable Gulf oil supply anchored by U.S. security guarantees. Remove the security guarantee, or even weaken the perception of it, and Gulf nations start making alternative arrangements. That is exactly what we are watching happen right now. Saudi Arabia has been quietly expanding its relationship with China. They've held discussions about pricing some oil sales in Chinese yuan. That's not a rumor. It's been reported by the Wall Street Journal and confirmed by multiple geopolitical analysts. This is a massive deal. The moment a significant volume of oil is priced outside the dollar, the foundational logic of petrodollar demand begins to erode. And here's the compounding factor: BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now several new members, including Saudi Arabia itself, have been actively working on reducing dollar dependency in trade settlements. Saudi Arabia joining BRICS in 2023 was not symbolic. It was a strategic pivot. A country that built its entire financial relationship on the dollar-oil axis was publicly signaling openness to alternatives. Let that sink in for a second. Now, does this mean the dollar collapses tomorrow? No. Anyone telling you that is being irresponsible. The dollar still represents about 58% of global foreign exchange reserves. That doesn't disappear overnight. But here's what does change: the trajectory. And in financial markets, trajectory is everything. The direction of dollar dominance is shifting. And the speed of that shift is being accelerated by three simultaneous forces: Trump's alienation of Gulf allies, the Iran military escalation, and BRICS de-dollarization momentum. Let's go deeper on the Iran angle, because this is where the national security implications get genuinely alarming. Iran has been systematically building what analysts call the axis of resistance, a network of proxy forces across Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza that can disrupt Gulf oil infrastructure on command. The Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping in late 2023 and throughout 2024 were a preview. They weren't just attacks on ships. They were a demonstration of Iran's ability to strangle global trade routes. Insurance costs for Red Sea shipping routes surged. Major carriers rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks and significant cost to global supply chains. That cost doesn't stay in the shipping industry. It flows directly into the prices you pay for goods. This is one of the underreported contributors to persistent global inflation. And here's the rehook that I want you to really think about. What happens if Iran escalation moves from proxy warfare to direct confrontation with U.S. forces or Gulf infrastructure? A direct strike on Saudi Aramco facilities, which already happened in 2019, temporarily knocked out 5% of global oil supply overnight. The global economy shook from a single attack. Now imagine that in the context of a full military escalation. The oil price spike alone would be destabilizing. The dollar's role in managing that crisis would be tested in ways we haven't seen since the 1970s oil shocks. Speaking of the 1970s, let's connect that historical thread, because it directly explains why the petrodollar was created and why its end would be so consequential. In 1971, Nixon ended the dollar's convertibility to gold. The dollar was suddenly floating on nothing but trust. By 1974, Henry Kissinger negotiated a deal with Saudi Arabia. The U.S. would provide military protection, and Saudi Arabia would price all oil sales in dollars and recycle oil revenues into U.S. Treasury bonds. That deal created artificial, structural global demand for US dollars. Every country that needed oil suddenly needed dollars first. It's the reason America could run the largest trade deficits in history and still remain the world's dominant economy. The demand for dollars was baked into the global energy system. Strip that out, even partially, and the United States loses one of its most powerful economic privileges. Now, here's something the mainstream financial media rarely discusses clearly: what de-dollarization actually means for everyday Americans. If global demand for dollars falls, the US government has to offer higher interest rates to attract buyers for Treasury bonds. Higher rates mean higher borrowing costs across the entire economy: mortgages, car loans, business credit, government spending. It means inflation becomes harder to control because the dollar loses purchasing power on global markets. Import prices rise, your cost of living goes up. This isn't abstract. This is the mechanism by which petrodollar erosion hits your wallet directly. And the people least prepared for it are working-class Americans who are already stretched thin by the inflation cycle of the last 3 years. Let's talk about China specifically, because Beijing's strategy here is deliberate, patient, and deeply underestimated by Western policymakers. China has been building the infrastructure for a parallel financial system for over a decade. The Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, CIPS, is their alternative to SWIFT. It's not yet at SWIFT's scale, but it's growing. China has bilateral currency swap agreements with dozens of countries. They've been purchasing gold at record levels. Their central bank gold reserves have increased dramatically as they quietly reduce U.S. Treasury holdings. They are systematically building every component needed to operate a major global economy without dollar dependency. And the Iran situation plays directly into their hands. Because while the U.S. is managing military escalation and spending political capital on Gulf relationships, China is playing the long economic game, signing energy deals, infrastructure contracts, and trade agreements across the Middle East, Africa, and Southeast Asia. The Belt and Road Initiative isn't just infrastructure, it's dollar displacement infrastructure. Now, I want to stop here and be honest with you about something, because Finance Truths is about accuracy, not alarm. The dollar's reserve status will not collapse in the next 5 years. The institutions, habits, and systems built around dollar dominance are extraordinarily deep. U.S. capital markets remain the largest and most liquid in the world. But what we are witnessing is the beginning of a structural multipolar shift. An historical precedent, from the British pound losing reserve status to the dollar, shows that these transitions happen slowly, then suddenly. The slow phase is happening now. Most people aren't watching it. Here's another pattern interrupt for you. Consider the role of gold in this story. Central banks globally purchased over 1,000 tons of gold in both 2022 and 2023, the highest levels in over 50 years. This isn't coincidence. Central banks buy gold when they are hedging against currency risk. They are telling you, through their actions, what they believe about the dollar's future. And they are buying insurance. Smart investors are paying attention to that signal. Now, let's bring this back to Trump's specific policy posture, because it has direct implications for the petrodollar's stability that go beyond rhetorical statements. Trump's America First trade policy, his tariff agenda, and his confrontational stance toward traditional allies create a credibility problem for the United States as the anchor of the global financial system. The dollar's reserve status is ultimately backed by trust. Trust in American institutions, legal systems, economic management, and geopolitical reliability. When allies perceive U.S. policy as unpredictable, they quietly begin diversifying, not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily. Trump's tariff war with virtually every major trading partner simultaneously, Europe, China, Canada, Mexico, disrupts the dollar-denominated trade flows that reinforce petrodollar demand. Less dollar-based trade globally means less structural demand for the dollar. The math is straightforward. And the Iran dimension ties directly into this, because U.S. credibility as a Gulf security guarantor is fundamental to Saudi Arabia's willingness to maintain the petrodollar arrangement. If Saudi Arabia believes that American commitment to Gulf security is conditional, performative, or unreliable under an America First framework, the rational response is to build alternative security and economic relationships, which is exactly what MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, has been doing. His Vision 2030 strategy isn't just economic diversification away from oil, it's political and financial diversification away from exclusive U.S. dependency. Saudi Arabia is simultaneously deepening ties with China, engaging with Russia on OPEC Plus strategy, and exploring new financial frameworks. That's not happening in a vacuum. It's a response to perceived American unreliability. So where does this leave us? Let me give you the clear analytical picture. The petrodollar system is under genuine multi-front pressure for the first time since its creation. The threats are not hypothetical. They are active, measurable, and accelerating. The Iran escalation is the most immediate risk. A major military confrontation disrupting Gulf oil infrastructure could trigger a dollar credibility crisis in real time. The BRICS de-dollarization movement is the medium-term structural risk. It's slow, it's uneven, but it's real, and it's building momentum. Trump's geopolitical posture, regardless of where you stand politically, creates unpredictability that rational global actors hedge against. That hedging accelerates the diversification trend. And China's patient infrastructure building across finance, trade, and energy is the long-term strategic threat to dollar dominance that the U.S. political system has been dangerously slow to address. The convergence of all four of these forces simultaneously is what makes this moment historically significant. Now here's my final analytical take, and I want you to think carefully about this. The end of the petrodollar doesn't mean the end of America. It means the end of American exceptionalism in global finance. It means the U.S. has to compete on the same terms as other major economies, instead of operating with a structural advantage baked into the global system. That transition will be painful. It will likely mean higher interest rates for longer, more volatile currency markets, higher import costs, and reduced U.S. government spending capacity without severe consequence. The Americans who will feel it hardest are not the wealthy. They hold assets that hedge inflation. It's the middle class and working class whose savings, wages, and cost of living will absorb the adjustment. That is the real stakes of this story, and that is why Finance Truths covers it even when it's uncomfortable. The petrodollar era may not be over tomorrow, but the clock is running. And the combination of the Iran conflict, Trump's geopolitical disruption, Saudi Arabia's strategic pivot, and China's quiet parallel system building has set that clock ticking faster than at any point in the last 50 years. Pay attention to where central banks are moving their reserves. Pay attention to oil pricing discussions. Pay attention to BRICS summits and bilateral currency deals. The signals are there for anyone willing to read them clearly. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what's actually happening in the global economy, not the noise, but the real structural shifts, then you're exactly who Finance Truths was built for. Hit that subscribe button right now. Every week, we cut through the financial noise and give you the analysis that actually matters for your understanding of where the world economy is heading. Drop a comment below. Do you think the petrodollar will survive the next decade? I read every single comment, and I want to know where you stand. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what's really happening behind the headlines, and watch until the very end of our next video, because the next topic connects directly to everything we just discussed. This is Finance Truths. Stay sharp, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.